This could be a heated topic, but I don't know. I mean, people have opinions on it, but it's out of all the topics and things to talk about that are kind of controversial or divide people. I don't think this is one of the biggest ones, but it does have some meaning to a lot of people. And of course, it comes up for me because the football game that I was talking about and watching that injury, I'll get to that in a bit. But I did have some students, I tutor students, and I had them kind of write about, nice simple essay topic. Maybe it's not so simple to a lot of people, but it was sort of, do violent video games cause violence among the people that play them? Right? You don't have to have any evidence or facts, just what do you think? What's your opinion? That was more of an opinion piece, an opinion essay. The responses actually were a little surprising. In general, I would think the female students tended to be a little more, I don't want to say it. It was actually pretty well divided. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time researching that. That wasn't my goal. I'm not really doing it as a thesis or anything like that. I was just kind of curious about things. Curious about, what is the consensus right now, or what's the leaning towards the general person. That's kind of why I had the students write it. Like, what do kids think? I didn't have adults write it, I had kids. What do kids think about this? But I did come across one article, the Center for Research. I'll post the citations, but it was interesting. Studies have shown that playing violent video games can increase aggressive thoughts, behaviors, and feelings in both the short term and long term. And there was a citation there. Violent video games can also desensitize people to seeing aggressive behavior and decrease pro-social behaviors such as helping another person, feeling empathy, the ability to understand others. I think people would know what empathy is if they're writing such articles or reading such articles. The longer that individuals are exposed to violent video games, the more likely they are to have aggressive behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. These effects have been seen in studies in both Eastern and Western countries. Although males spend more time than females playing violent video games, violent video game exposure can increase aggressive thoughts, behaviors, and feelings in both sexes. And for most of those, we've got that can. Can's a great word because you can't really argue with can. May, perhaps, might, can, all those are very safe words. Use them. Because what are people going to say? They can't. You can't argue with that. But there is one. The longer that individuals are exposed to violent video games, the more they are likely to have aggressive behavior. That's a pretty strong statement. And now, only the first part is really from the Psychological Bulletin 2010. So this is just one article. It really is, to me, I don't want to say meaningless, but it only carries a certain amount of weight because I can go online right now and probably find another article that says, nope, there's no proof whatsoever. And you kind of get what you're looking for. I guess you will find what you're looking for. Now, for the backstory, the reason it came up for me was I was watching an NFL football game. I watch a lot of football games. I think I spend a great many hours during football every season, watching NFL Red Zone. So I'm exposed to football, all that. So I guess violence to some degree. That's a whole different subject. But there was one particular play. It was a wild card game, Seattle against Dallas, in Dallas on January 5th, 2019. And if you watch the game, if you're a football fan, you probably know what I'm talking about. The player is tackled by a Seattle player. It was a wide receiver tackled by a Seattle player, and in real time, gets tackled, and he is banging his hand. The kind of when you're in such pain that you're just slamming your hand down. You're just physically acting out that pain, probably screaming too. We couldn't hear that, but probably screaming. Then, of course, we get to the slow motion replay. Now, I don't know what the 7-second rule delay, I don't know if they really can or just want to edit that, but they showed it, and you can see the guy being tackled, and all of a sudden, the last part of the tackle, I don't want to get too graphic here, the ankle just, and for me, that's what I saw, is the ankle just kind of snapped. It wasn't bloody. I don't think the skin broke, and there was no bones or anything like that. So that was interesting, but they say, they kind of commented on it and said, we're not going to show that again. Thank you. But for me, that was sickening. It was just like, you almost feel nauseous. That was just something I did not want to see and I never want to see it again, ever. Now, as I researched it, it said it had a fractured knee and a dislocated ankle. To me, the ankle just looked completely snapped, but it said dislocated, which is bad, of course, but snapped and dislocated are two different things, and even fractured and completely broken are two different things, of course, but none of it's good. It's all bad. But it was also interesting because, you know, in that moment when you're seeing it without the blood and without bones and all that, any graphic problems, you're just seeing something that you're not supposed to see. You know, the body's moving in a way it's not supposed to move. What I mean is sort of, if you ever watch those birds walking and how the legs bend the opposite way, and it kind of freaky at first if you've never seen it, but then you're kind of used to it now. Okay, that's the way birds' legs bend, especially like, what is it, what are they called? Flamingos. You know, watch the flamingos walk. So that's the way it's supposed to happen. So I think if an alien were watching the video of that happening, they'd think, what's the big deal? So things twisted a little. But we know how far the ankle's supposed to bend before it breaks. So it's going against something that we've been trained to think. I mean, for good reason, but it's going against just the norm. I mean, it's not supposed to work that way. So you can kind of know the elbow can bend this way, but if you see an elbow bend the other way, even without blood or broken skin or whatever, it's still raw. It still affects you. So yeah, for me, it was disturbing. I mean, it was really disturbing. And that was a pretty, I wouldn't say it's a minor injury, but it wasn't like a torso got torn in two or a head came. It wasn't like extremely graphic. It was like, it was almost like a broken finger. It was more than a broken finger, like seeing a finger go the wrong way. But it was odd how disturbing that was for me. And I think a lot of other people, again, they kind of commented this was a really bad image. And there's been a lot worse. Don't get me wrong. This is the NFL. We've seen some horrific things happen. Just shocking. But it made me think, it's like, now I don't really play much video games anymore. I used to though. I used to play the ones, especially like Quake and Unreal. I mean, you're basically going around trying to kill people. And of course the big kill was headshot. You take off somebody's head, and I think there was blood and guts and things like that. It wasn't, the graphics back then weren't what they are today, but even so, yeah, all those games, I played them for a while, and that was the goal, killing other people. I mean, but they were pixels, but they still, I mean, this was maybe 10 years ago. They still look pretty darn real, I guess, to some degree. And of all those video games, I don't think I was desensitized, because I'm watching this video of just a little foot snapping the wrong way, and that's pretty shocking and disturbing. And then part two, there's a series, there's a lot of violence on TV, countless violence on TV. One show I liked, it was fun, Spartacus. Spartacus, they just chopped off heads, they sliced a head in half, and you had the side of the head kind of fall off, and arms and legs and torsos and guts, and that was pretty much the bloodiest show. And it seemed kind of farcical or almost cartoonish to some degree, but it was special effects. It looked pretty real, but you knew it wasn't. You knew that a person didn't really get his head sliced open, or all the violence was fabricated. There were some more disturbing than others to a degree. It was like, ew, but it didn't desensitize me. Again, all that violence, I mean, I don't know how many seasons, 3 seasons, whatever it was, all that, and yet a foot snapping was still disturbing. Now, if that weren't enough, okay, the video games and the movies or the TV shows, we've also got books. Books talk about things too. Books talk about headshots and about decapitation and things like that. And I mean, even some of it's talking about real things that happen, or the fiction's talking about like invented things, but we got that to consider as well. So all these things added up that I've been experiencing too, and of course, this is anecdotal. This is just one person, but sometimes one person does represent many, not everyone, but many. Or unless I could be the exception. That's the problem with anecdotal evidence. It might just be one person and totally represent nobody except that one person. And I thought about, oh, what's the importance of this? Well, right now, of course, you've got kids, I don't know how many, but they're exposed to video games. The big video game is Fortnite. Fortnite, I've never played. I don't even think I've actually seen, but I know of it. I read articles, I know of these things, and I think it's like a Hunger Games. Again, another thing where we're all killing people. I watched all 3 of the movies, and yet a foot snapping still is shocking and disturbing. So if I were truly desensitized, then that should not be disturbing to me. And it is. But Fortnite, you're going around killing. So is Fortnite having a detrimental effect towards kids? Is it making them aggressive, more violent towards other kids? I don't think so. I mean, for me, I've not read a lot of research. I've not seen a lot of things. I could change my mind easily if I just were convinced. But it would help if my prime example, me, wasn't against what people are saying. If saying, yes, it does cause it. Well, the problem is if people say it causes it and you're one exception, then it doesn't help convince you because, it didn't work on you. So that's a big thing. But it does come up. It is important. I think it's important to kind of analyze and evaluate because it comes up. I mean, you do have these big tragedies that happen, and you do have young people or old people or people, doing mass shootings, things like that. And it comes up. It's not a bad question to ask. I mean, it's fair. You should ask these questions. But was it the video games that caused it, or cause and effect? Was it they were violent people, so they liked video games, or because they liked video games, they became violent video games? They became violent people. But we have a lot of people playing these games, and statistically, not that much. Sometimes it seems like more than other countries. Yes, something to consider though, because I spent time in England years ago as a student, and one thing that came up, but it was 2002, so it was not that far removed from some of our Columbine tragedy. And the people I lived with, the homestay people, they said, what's going on over there? How come these kids are like doing this kind of stuff? And they didn't really understand. I don't think any of us totally understand, but I was like, well, it's complicated, and that's an answer for a lot of things, but it was like, we have 350 million at least, I think it's more than that, 350 million people. Now, there's bound to be a couple of people with, I don't want to sound like, I don't know the word was, I can't think of the word, but insensitive, but there's bound to be some crazy people out there, even kids. So out of 350 million people, and what the causes were, it's worth evaluating. It's worth trying to figure out even what caused that. But there's a lot of people playing video games that don't do such things. 1 out of a million. In fact, it's closer to 1 out of a billion. If you've got a billion people, you're gonna have unfortunately, some crazy people out there. So statistically, that's low, because England can say, well, we haven't had that many. Well, you don't have that many people, at least not near as many as we do here. So that's one thing to consider. It doesn't blow it all off. It doesn't say it's not worth checking out. Not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, if you're going with statistics alone, there's that. Because I think we want to know, how that stuff all works. Again, in the end, isn't it all synapses, electricity, and chemicals? Isn't that what it kind of comes down to? Or you can get into souls or things like that too, of course. But in the end, do those video games affect it? If you could go back to Aristotle and the old Greek plays of way back when, and the idea was a catharsis. It's if you can see revenge, or you can see people, the underdog, winning or taking out his enemies on the stage, it helps, because then it helps just at least I can watch it. At least I can assume the role of the protagonist for the play. But it doesn't mean you're going to go out and think, now I need to do it in real life. And again, the catharsis was now that I've seen it, and of course espousing or postulating the importance of theater, now that I've seen it, I don't have that same feeling of wanting to do it. So that's kind of some of the reasoning, not saying it's right or wrong, it's just some of the reasoning of why this stuff's important. Even the shows like Spartacus, it's sometimes helpful, some people think, to watch other people just taking out their enemies. And that's nothing new, of course. This has been around a long time. But yeah, it does bring up, were these kids, were the problem kids already on a path and this just had nothing to do with it? Or were they on a good path? Were they on a good path? The video games somehow changed that to the bad path. I don't know. It's still worth exploring. So I just don't know what a a violent video game in general can do, because it didn't do anything for me. I don't feel any more violent towards people. Even road rage, it's like I get frustrated, but I don't really do anything, and the video games didn't change that. The movies haven't changed that. The books haven't changed that. So those things, I don't know if they really, truly, at least I haven't seen evidence of that. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but I've experienced things that have made a feeling of difference, a feeling of power. I've shot weapons, the 45s, M16s, M60s. I mean, some pretty big weapons. You do get a feeling of power and I'm not saying it causes aggression, but you do get a feeling of power. It does something when you're holding these weapons that can affect change, protection, get the job done, so to speak. Does that mean it created like a change right or wrong, or their preponderancy to do wrong or evil? I don't think so. But you do feel power. I mean, you do feel power. Whole different topic altogether, though. But going back to violent video games. But it all came up just from one simple play during a football game. It's something I've thought about a little bit over the years. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but when I see things like that, I realize I don't think I'm desensitized, because it almost affected me too much. I thought, man, that's just really, I feel empathy for the person that happened to, for the people watching. I just feel like I don't ever want to see stuff like that again. I'll keep watching football and people say, yeah, the NFL is an extremely violent sport. How can you let kids play? Which is another great topic and a great question. The concussions, they're doing a lot. They're not visible damage, but certainly they can do a lot of damage, and that's important. That's worth exploring. I don't know if I'd want my kids playing, tackle football. There's a lot of things to think about there, but some say the effects are just as bad as a broken ankle, because that can heal, and that's not affecting one of the most important organs in your body. So those are things worth exploring. But for me, I'd say I didn't see any, in my own life, I haven't seen any evidence that all the violence that I've been exposed to through fiction. Again, if I were in a war, I haven't said it before, if I were in a war zone and I saw it, I don't know, I can't even fathom how that would have affected me. But all I'm talking about is fictional violence, which video games are. So for me, I'd say the fictional violence has not affected me, so it's harder for me to consider that it's affecting others, but there's still a lot of research that can and should be done. So just food for thought. Not saying one thing or the other. Not saying it does, not saying it doesn't. I'm just not sure. I'm not convinced it does. That's all I'm saying at this point right now. Could change. We'll see.